Welcome to the EQ for Life podcast. EQ for Life is a podcast based on your views as a parent, a companion, an entrepreneur, or business leader, and how learning to be smart about emotions plays out in everyday life. And here's our host, a practitioner and teacher of emotional intelligence, Parrish Owen Taylor.
So just some high-level debrief pre-planning stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Got the questions, and I point up to my screen. So got the questions, got your responses. We're just going to flow.
Yeah, one of the things I thought about last night was I want us to pre-state that, behavior modification isn't the always go-to. When we do an audit, there can be things wrong on the design. There could be things wrong in the sequence of the process. There can be all kinds of things. But when it comes down to needing to deal with behaviors, the progressive steps of discipline policy is the best way because it helps separate out the emotion. It helps, keep intellect in charge of the whole situation. And when you have a team who knows the steps, who knows the process, and then you can utilize the process to bring about change. You'll really like the story that I'm going to share in that whole thing. But there were parts in that story I disagree with in the beginning. I saw where it went, but the whole thinking part, the whole intelligence part. Hey, you go to her. The whole intelligence part of once you, as a manager, know that you have this planned process. Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
That solves that issue right there.
What was that? I didn't hear it.
All eating out of his bowl. But
mine snores, so I put him in the back. Again, you're hitting on some things. Once everyone knows policy, knows step 1, step 2, step 3.
As a team, as a management team, we've talked about in the past about, when I come into a meeting with the leadership team, I might fight for what I want and what I feel, in my opinion. But once we've come to a consensus in the room, whether the consensus is all of my opinion, part of my opinion, or none of my opinion, when we leave that room, our team, we have one focus. It's all of our ideas. It's all my idea. There's no they said, I say. So when that same thought process in developing your leadership team and all, when it comes down to behavioral or steps, progressive steps of a discipline policy, the progression part, it allows you to intelligently think of, how we handle this, what is our possible, risk and threat, what is our benefit, all that good stuff. And you can work it as opposed to being emotionally enthralled and being ticked off about something somebody's not done or something somebody has done. And you get totally out of whack. You get totally, and all you're doing is throwing retribution around, punishments. You're not intelligently moving along a path to save an employee and accomplish the change you want to accomplish. So many companies have a progressive steps. Most bargaining companies that are union have a progressive steps of discipline policy. I'm taking it right out of memorandums and agreements from several contracts I've been a part of. It's a norm. But you get in a non-union workforce, and it's not a norm. It's just whatever we feel like at the time. There is no policy. There is no steps. There is no anything. Then you open up to emotion.
Right. No, so you just said a lot right there. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to grab my pen and paper and start taking notes to be able to reply on there. So yes, let's drill down on some of what you said, and I know you got a story in the bullpen here.
Yeah.
So you made the comparison. Let me point out a couple of things. You made the comparison between the union workforce and the non-union workforce. It's written into the code of ethics on the union side of the house. It's established. We got that. Yet still emotions play out on that side of the house, even with the policy in place. And we understand that from our human performance models, right? I got this human performance figure, comes right out of the handbook. It's a playbook. There's three-legged stool. The first leg is equipment, right? It helps performance or hinders performance. The second is SOPs, right? This is that policy built into that SOP. And is it flawed or did the equipment break? It's neither of those. It's the workforce. It's the human capital, and that's us. So what you're saying is making perfect sense. Union side of the house has it in written, has a procedure. The non-side, what I see is a lot like you and I, entrepreneurs. We're starting our business. We get the big contract. We hire the people. It works. It works.
I don't want anybody telling me how I can discipline and can't discipline. I don't want to be held by a policy. Well, then if your ego, emotions are here and you don't have a policy because you don't want to be held, your ego is getting in the way of, now don't get me wrong, with that policy, do I end up with some bad employees longer than I would have wanted them? Yeah. But you have certain things like insubordination. Insubordination, there's not a progressive steps of discipline policy. Insubordination is a terminating offense, right? So anything we do beyond firing you with insubordination is grace.
Creating every opportunity to get the right person in the right seat and empower them to succeed. That's what you're saying.
Right. You might have a lot of hard-nosed guys that struggle with the way we've always done it. They've been doing it that way for 20 years. You come in, you've implemented a new best practice or a new safe work procedure that's come along the lines, and they're fighting it. So you've got to work, to get their paradigm to shift away from that crutch we all carry of the way we've always done it. So a lot of times, you can mandate it. Anything you mandate, you got to check. Anything you check, you've got to then reinforce and evaluate and relook at it.
You mentioned another thing here, and again, what I'm hoping in this podcast is, for the lack of a better, and we're going to go to an intro on you. We haven't done that yet, but is to get inside the knowledge and the experience, bring that emotional intelligence piece into it, and that's what we're doing. You said many things. One of them earlier was when the senior leadership team, you come into that meeting, you now are hashing out your new SOPs. If there needs to be a refinement of how we're going to do something, you bring it to the game. You get emotionally in charge as you want, but when the decision is made,
it's
power of the pen, that this is our standard. At that point, you're speaking to something I think there's lacking. That environment, we call it diagnostics, where again, a senior owner or someone at the top brings the people together and says, all right, hash this out. But when we're done, you're going out, you're going to communicate this as I own it. That right there's emotional intelligence, or the lack thereof from a leadership perspective.
Anytime corporate tries to roll something out, all right, it will die and never make it into the rollout based upon your weakest supervisor. All it takes is one supervisor to sit down with his crew and go, I disagree with this, but this is what they're telling us now.
I hear it all the time.
When he was in that room, and the way you deal with that is you spin him around. You don't put him leading that crew meeting, you put him in the crew. We have, and that's something as a leader, you got to make sure that everybody in your canoe's rowing, that nobody's back there in the back drilling holes. And as soon as you find somebody within your leadership team that is not a part of the team, they're an individual, they need to go. Now you can do discipline even with your supervisory staff like that. You could let him know. You can have just a conversation. And then the progressive steps discipline policy is in the memorandum of agreement. It's really for the BU employees, or even for employees when you're dealing with non-BU, you can have a progressive steps of discipline policy. That's a policy that your company writes, even at a Pike or something like that. But you've got to make sure you have the right people on that team first, because the first time you see a guy doing that, you call him and say, listen, you had your opportunity. And I can see your point where we may end up falling back to one of your points that you're saying, but as a team, we want to go forward with it now. We'll evaluate your point afterwards to see if it rolls or if it doesn't. But if you can't get with us, if you can't get behind us, you don't need to be a supervisor.
Well, I'm with you. Now allow me to chime in on this.
Mm-hmm.
And we're gonna go a little bit further when we put him into the supervisory position to lead. That's where that emotional intelligence competency model comes into play. And it's incumbent of us, the house, seniors, that says, okay, again, right person, right seat, doing the right things. Is this individual, do they demonstrate the leadership skills that are reflected in and so what you're talking about, I teach the model, Tim, of 5. There's 5 points on the map. These first 3 have to do with what our leaders are doing in their own business. Because leaders have a different way of thinking and feeling about things. And those are skills in the first 3. But when you get to leadership, empathy, mindfulness, interpretation, observation, relationship management, those are those skills we want that supervisor to have. And in your situation, that first maybe couple interactions where we see it's not done right, is that a skill deficiency?
Definitely coaching opportunity. Like on a young supervisor, I may not crucify a young supervisor. Some guy's been a supervisor for a long time. He knows what he's doing wrong, and he's doing intention to sabotage me. So then I need to sit him to have a man-to-man meeting. Don't point at me or you, buddy. I want to play that way. You make it me or you, you're going.
I love you, man. Well,
but
and that's
supervisor. You can coach him on that because he's never had to deal with it. He's never, one of the things I tell linemen all the time, a brand new lineman, we will upgrade him and let him be a lineman like around holidays and people on vacation and all, because there's an issue going on here. He used to be one of these guys. Now he's one of these guys and he's in charge. So how he interacts with his buddy apprentices in his new role. So we coached him and encouraged him through that and backed them up. Sometimes we backed up young linemen that were, a little bit outside the fringes there and what he was hollering at his apprentice about. But I backed up the lineman because if we don't back him up, he's never going to be able to step out there.
I hope our listeners are taking notes on. You just introduced a little trade secret of how you can condition a young supervisor. Again, those holidays and weekends, putting them in position. And in the short stories, and this is layman's terms, this ain't learning terms, but to learn how you're not one of the boys anymore. You're now learning how to lead them. And again, that all goes back to that EQ, EI stuff. Tim, it's so good. Listen, I want to continue to kind of bounce around. We're hitting a lot of different things here. When it comes to the I want to make sure I'm getting it right. It is the progressive steps, disciplinary policy. There's 5. Give me a high level overview of what the 5 are.
Well, the first thing isn't really discipline. That's the man-to-man conversation. The first discipline is I'm putting a written letter in your file. Some people do what they call a verbal letter first. It's still written because that's the only way we put it in a file, but it's called a verbal. Then they go to a written. So I skipped some people have it stretched out really long, which I made a comment in there. Some of them go, but you have a letter in the file. That came after we had a man-to-man talk. One of the things as a consultant, I tell the guys all the time when I'm doing evaluations and audits and all like that, nothing will reach paper. Nothing will go to the ear of your boss that I haven't said to you first. And I'll sit there with the actual document that's going to go to their boss and I'll go over it with them.
You're doing 2 things there. One, as a consultant, you're setting your standard of your service. And building rapport and trust, which is all in AI. But you're also leading by example to say, hey, when you're leading your crew, is that the message?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, So even in this situation with the discipline, the first conversation is not discipline. That's just respect. I simply sit down with you with my little manager's notebook, and I write the date and the time, and me and you had this meeting. This is what was discussed. This is what I gave you, and I let you initial that. It's just my record that nobody gets this. This is Timmy's, and we had our discussion. The only reason I made notes is for my reference material if this pops up again at some later date. So then when something does pop up at a later date, then you just move. I don't see again. I don't. And another thing with this conversation, you need to speak direct. Okay. You were late. You've been late twice. These are the dates and times you were late. Tardiness is not accepted. Here is a copy of the company's written policy on tardiness. Your expectation is that you will be here on time, ready to go to work. Okay. If you speak with, I really like for you to start being on time from now on, and that's such passive speech. And what happens with passive speech is now when he didn't listen to me and he comes in late again, I'm emotionally charged, overly emotionally charged because I tried to be nice first. Now you're making me be a dick. All right. So I'm just ate up with emotion and we're running into all this, where if you were direct and precise, when he comes in late the next day, go, yeah, I see you, go on to work, tell his lineman I'll need him back in about 15, 20 minutes early. And you don't have to be emotional.
There's two things working here. I just need to point them out more from a lesson objective than anything. One is personality styles. We can have leaders or supervisors that have passive personality styles because they are that learn their style, but yet learn to be with a chameleon. And when it's time to be direct, they're direct. Right. So if you are in that style of being a little bit more of an introvert, then it's the emotional intelligence journey, the skills that enable that. So I had to point that out. You got two things working here
in that space. To be direct in that space.
Yes.
And to understand all this is stuff that we need to be teaching the frontline supervisors. They have the frontline supervisor course through IP and all that's excellent that teaches a lot of this stuff. But, we have so many guys that are so ill-equipped to be in there in so many battles without, a manager is mentoring his supervisors. An executive is mentoring his managers. And if that process isn't in place, if I can't go on vacation and allow you to be me while I'm gone, and I speak to another manager to let that manager know you're going to be here, the whole manager team, 5, 6 of us, we all know that you're going to be upgraded for this next 2 weeks, and they're going to call and they're going to check in on you. They're going to talk to you. They're going to be doing stuff because we are mentoring you. If we just throw you up there for 2 weeks and ignore you, and what happens, what didn't serve again? And that's the norm.
I know. Well, again, that's us failing them. What you just described right there. Okay, so we're back on those 5. If I was again trying to, if we're going to give a little knowledge nugget here, number 1, verbal out of respect. Verbal out of respect, and I'm going to show you.
Yeah, that's not. We don't really call that discipline, but that
it's the first step.
It is the first step.
The second step is, okay, you called this meeting. I'm going to put it. So the first is verbal. What's the second?
Written.
Now I got a letter, and I'm going to put it in your file.
Right, and it can stay there. We can say how long. So normally it's 3 years if there's not a reoccurrence. So it's a serious issue.
The third.
The third is a letter with actual suspension and lack of pay. We'll start with
one day off.
And again, also using our intelligence to bring mom, wife, parents, depending on what his home life is, are coming into this behavioral modification ploy. Every day you sit at the house not being paid, mama knows you're sitting in the house not being paid. And you can say, oh, they're a bunch of jackasses. They're mistreating me. They're doing this. And you come back in and anybody with 2 brain cells can see once the progressive steps of discipline policy is laid out that, man, you've got to go a long way to get terminated. You got to go a long way. So the company is literally saying you're behaving incorrectly. We want you to behave this way. You didn't do it, so now we put a letter in your file. You didn't do it, so now we put another letter in your file with a day off. Now mom's involved. Now your wife's involved. Do it again, you're going to get another letter with 2 days off. Mom's really getting on you because mom knows the steps now. You get to the 4th, which is your 5th, which is your 3rd day off, and a last chance letter. That letter lets you know there's not going to be another step. The next step is you're just fired. And even if you go to some of the island communities that I work, whether it be Kauai, whether it be in the Caribbean and all that, there's such a Ono or family orientation to all of this. I tell guys when we're talking about discipline and the importance of discipline, I say it's hard to discipline this guy. I might have dated his mom in high school. We're a small island. And I ask him, well, let me ask you a question. Would you rather be walking through the grocery store, picking up a couple items for the wife, or his mom turned down the aisle? And as she passes you in the aisle, she tells you, oh, Johnny is mad at you. You said, I know, hun, but I care about him enough to let him be mad at me. He's coming along. He's learning. And you and her can have some good chuckles and talk about that. And she'll share you some of her disciplinary stories with him, the whole 9 yards, right? Now, same situation. I come to that aisle. I turn to go down the aisle as she turns up, and her son died or lost his arm yesterday because of my lack of speaking up, because I didn't want that little guy mad at me. Now, how am I going to handle that conversation with mom? No, you're going to turn around and run out of the store. So, it's everybody thinks about emotions pop up and they think about dealing with the emotion. You've got to shift that paradigm off of that initial emotion part and discuss it out to,
You just used emotion to illustrate your point.
Yeah.
In the most elementary level, again, the emotions of the mother, whether or not I, adhere to the standard of which we teach and practice, or if I let it slide a little bit. Again, the emotional interaction with mom. So, yes, good illustration, Tim. I appreciate this. So again, just kind of breaking those out, just kind of hashing that out. We're going to have a verbal man-to-man. I'm going to show you policy. I'm going to say, hey, let's get with the program.
That's pure respect.
We come back a second time. I'm going to say, you're calling the meeting. You're Mr.
Discipline now.
And going to put
some emphasis.
Letter in the file with 1 day, letter in the file with 2 days, letter in the file with 3 days, and a final notice. Now you see, if you go back to that 3-legged stool, man, that is the policy. It's solid. It's one of what we might call the best practice policies. So now here we go, 3-legged stool. Doesn't have much to do with your equipment other than journaling, we might say. Here's the policy. Now, you emotional humans follow the policy. Where does emotional intelligence come in? You kind of talked about it. Let me cut to the chase. What if you got people in the organization that are protected? You know what I mean when I say protected?
That's
so
why.
What do we say to a culture? Because a lot of this is culture. A lot of this doesn't go on in our meetings and our strategies. Going out there where all the work's getting done.
You'll like my story. So let me share the story with you first of what I'm going to share in the podcast. This example story I'll be sharing in the podcast. A friend of mine, was working, and he dug a hole to fix a splice pit in a corner of a person's yard with 6-foot pine privacy fences. And it was one of the fence posts actually hit the service underground. And so he's dug down, hot summer day, to splice it. When he's all done, he's sitting on the edge of the hole and he goes to wipe. He's got all his PPE on. He's perfect. Well, he goes to wipe the sweat on his brow and push his hat back, but his hard hat rolls off. And there's a sago palm the guy planted in the very corner of that yard. It's only about 18 inches high, and they look like an umbrella sitting on the ground. and wasp nest was in there, and the wasps start flying around, and in swinging his hand, his glove hand catches his safety glasses, drags the stem across his eye, scratching his eye, requiring antibiotics and seeing a doctor. OSHA recordable incident. Okay. In my interaction with that as a young manager, actually a relieving manager at the time, the VP said he wanted 3 days off with no pay. And I thought, I know this guy's a great guy. I thought, man, that's excessive. Why are we going to there? You know, that's crazy. And the VP goes, work with me. I'm chasing something here. So I said, yes, sir. Still not agreeing with it. So he told me, he says, you're pretty tight with this individual. I said, yes, sir. I said, you know his sons. And he has 2 twin boys, and they were in like kindergarten, first grade at the time. He says, Tim, what happens if you go to his 2 boys and tell them to go kick that bush? I said, us Florida kids are going to tell you, no, sir, that bush is full of bugs. He says, all right, I want you to pull his pre-job briefing document. I want you to see if he identified the hazard of the bugs in that sago palm. If he didn't, it's 3 days off with no pay and a letter in his file. And I thought, holy crap, I still don't believe in the sincerity. But I'm going with my boss because this is what he's told me. I've voiced my opinion to my VP, and he's let me know I'm chasing something here, work with me. So I said, yes, sir. So he came in. We did the disciplinary action, everything all filled out. He's got his job steward with him. Job steward and him, same thing I did. I knew because I knew what they're thinking, because I thought the same thing. Oh, this is too excessive. Oh, you're being ridiculous. Oh, you guys are on a head witch hunt. You know, I said, if I go to your boys and I tell your boys to go kick that sago palm in the back corner of that yard, what will your boys tell me? He says, they won't go kick that. They know it's full of bugs. I said, all right, brother, your pre-job brief form right here mentions nothing of the hazard of the sago palm and the bugs. So you're getting 3 days off with no pay. So he goes home, does his 3 days off. He grieves it, of course. He grieves, not that he's guilty. He grieves the amount of discipline. So he's an individual himself. He's a very smart guy. So when we go all the way through first step and then a month later, second step, we get to the third step of his grievance. System counsel's all in there. VP, myself, and actually I was playing 2 roles in there. I was playing the manager and playing my role as resource foreman. And the VP goes, I'll tell you what I'm willing to do, guys. So before we even discuss anything or talk, I'll give David 2 of his days back, modify the letter to 1 day off, and that rides. And they all agreed, yeah, that's because that's the only thing we're grieving here really is the severity. He did that. Now, let me tell you what was happening over those months. Over those months, we were having a problem. You could go walk the dock in the evening. Guys were filling out their pre-job brief form in the truck at the end of the day. Pencil whipping it, right. And the rate that, how well they were filled out and their hazard recognition standard was really low. When we did this with David and we publicized the reason, it's not in the pre-job brief form, it's not in this, you know, all these things, you know, peel back the onion and laid that out. We were getting meteorite falls out of the sky, space junk falls, plane crashes into my work site, all kinds of stupid stuff. But you let that ride, you let that go, you accept it. Bring it. So when all that leveled off, they were preparing on time and with proper hazard, the standard raised significantly to where we wanted it to be. So it had done what the boss said, work with me. I'm trying to do, I'm going somewhere here. So when he walked that all the way through, and then when we got to third step, that's his opportunity. That's his grievance. He's not in grievances until third step. So the VP is in the grievance. And he says, yeah, now we're here. I know I'll give 2 days back to David. That was way too severe.
I love it.
I was only doing it to you, Dave. First of all, here's the other thing. This stuff doesn't always happen to your worst employee. You got to recognize up front when you're writing your policy, when you're writing your progressive steps of discipline policy, I may have to do this with a good guy. And when I'm doing this with a good guy, I have outs based upon him and his behavior. With a progressive steps of discipline policy, I have outs all along the way. So they made an example of David. Went all the way to 3 days off in a letter. Oh, that got everybody's attention. Holy smokes, we skip steps. What are they, crazy? You can't skip steps. They're going, all this stuff's going on. And it was all intentional from the VP. As soon as we got the third step, he gave him those 2 days back. Was his intention from the beginning. Told David he had to be the one that was an example, but I'll give you those 2 days back. But and good employees like, yeah, boss, I appreciate that. Thank you. No, I do see the change. The whole council agreed with us. Oh no, we're at a much better place.
Two things come to mind, Tim, and this all plays into EQ, human performance, but effective and efficient. Those are 2 big words in our space, man. Being effective is the human side of leadership, which that VP clearly effective, indirect, right? And as a result of his intelligence, not attacking, but yet holding accountable, and then indirectly sending the message. And what did it do? It raised the standard. That's effective. That's EQ. But the efficiency side, again, that's saying, look, we got a policy here. We got a standard. We got a way to do the street job briefs.
Yeah.
Do it right. And again, that kind of was already there. But back to the 3-legged stool, back to your story there of holding people accountable, which, by the way, I think it's like here in the leadership competency, holding people accountable. Man, a brilliant story.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've used that story, so I learned so much from that. Now, here's another thing. You'll find that leaders like that leader that we had there's a season for that type of a leader, and then there's a season for not having that guy. But he was in a position of wanting to be an extreme change leader in the areas of safety and the areas of performance. And he knew that he was going to have to use all the tools in the toolbox to bring about cultural change. You can say safety is the most important thing. Great. Yep. Safety is most important. Yep. Got that. But it's still, you start making people accountable for not being safe. When you've got to get to the point where the guys go, yeah, they say safety is important, but they want me to be fast. They say that, but they want me to be fast. And until you start making them slow down, forcibly causing them to slow down, did they realize, no, they're serious. This is the new way we need to do it. So again, there's so much in that, in good, proper leadership, having a plan, being able to detach from emotion. Now, there are other times where you're not utilizing this to bring about change. You're utilizing this to get rid of a bad employee.
Right.
And when
you're talking about this being the policy, the progressive stuff. I get it, man. I get it. I mean, these are wonderful examples. You get different options.
I mean, in our circle, employees are expensive. We put a lot of money into getting a guy from a groundman to a fully functional journeyman lineman where he's actually being productive for me. There's a huge investment there. So to turn around and just willy-nilly get upset or mad at somebody and fire them. One more story for you, and we'll figure out whether we're going to use this or not. We had where VP was coming to the op center for a briefing, and 2 of the guys, instead of backing their vehicle in, nosed their vehicles in the front parking lot. So supervisor was sent over there to go tell them, turn their vehicle around. Ha ha, funny. Go turn that around before the VP gets here. Well, the 2 guys in the brake room told him to go screw himself. So he comes back to the manager, tells the manager, hey, they told me this. You want me to go back and do something about it? No. Don't send him back. That'd be a fist fight. You're out of the picture now. Too much emotion here. And so the manager himself walks around to the break room. So I need to see you two in my office, please. And turns around and walks back to his office. One guy goes out, turns his car around and backs it in before he comes into the office. The other guy just walks in there cocky. When the guy walked in there cocky, didn't turn his vehicle around, manager just told him, badge and keys, you're on administrative leave for insubordination. We'll call you when we need to talk to you again. They sent him home. This is a Monday morning. They send him home on administrative. That's paid leave. He stays home all week, goes through the weekend. We get off work at 3:30. They call him at 2, wanting him to be at the office at 2:30, very end of Monday. So he comes in. They turn around and gave him a 3-day letter with 3 days, or 5-day letter with 5 days off of no pay. Or matter of fact, they did 6 because they counted that Monday.
They went to the extreme. Final notice.
And wrote him, this is insubordination. There will be no other incidents of insubordination. Now, he didn't grieve that. He didn't have an attitude when he came back. He'd been sitting at home for 8 days, knowing his ass is fired. His wife has gone from being his defender, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday morning for sure. She is now on his crap. I don't know who you think you are, but we need that damn job. And we get those conversations, right? So when he showed up Monday,
yes, sir.
He had his hat in his hand. He was so happy he wasn't fired.
Back then.
He was so ecstatic that he still had a job. He had a last chance letter for insubordination in his file. You don't need a last chance letter for insubordination. Insubordination is a terminating offense. There's no pass go. There's no collect $200. But he was a solid, good employee. He was actually a union steward, to be honest with you. So he was, so one, detached from the supervisor. How many people would have sent that supervisor back? Tell him to get in my office. You'd have sent a man into a fight. So you get that emotion out. I'm emotionally charged. You just, or whoever the manager is emotionally charged because you just told my supervisor to go F himself, which is telling me to go F myself. So I need to get away from the emotions. Best way to get away from the emotion, badge, keys, go home. You're on administrative leave. We'll call you when we're ready. Now the emotion's gone. Now I can bring in all the other managers. I can bring in the VP, who's going to be here shortly. And as a leadership team, we talked to that. And it was the VP's idea. Now we're going to wait till close of business Monday, a whole week for him to come back. And then we'll give him this last chance letter and tell him we're taking that pay away. The 6 days he was out was on administrative leave. We're now going to take that.
This is good stuff. I think we're covering a lot of bases here. You know, I'm always thinking from a learning perspective and modularizing this. I want to flip the coin for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
When you have a high performer,
Mm-hmm.
be it the supervisory level,
Mm-hmm.
foreman, GF, stoop, whatever. What are they looking like today? Let's talk about what
5-6 years experience is all they've got in the trade. And some of them got, 8 or 9 years of experience, but I mean, it's getting younger and younger and younger. And with the amount of talent walking out the door, you see, when I worked for some of the IOUs and you became a supervisor, made a supervisor job, you went to managing a bargaining unit workforce training class. And a lot of that was very helpful. But, learning the memorandums of agreement, how to apply it, how not to apply, what you can do, what you can't do. But the whole thing of, for us in our region was the leadership of the VP and him trying to forcibly bring about cultural change in a certain area and having your entire plan, how we audit, how we discipline, how we do all this is with the idea of we need to strengthen, encourage, and grow our employees into the culture and the thought process, the paradigm we want them in. And like you said, when a good guy gets you've got to continue on with it. You can't just immediately wipe it all away with grace and ignore it because he was a good employee. You've still got to follow your process. You've still got to do, because that is the meaning of it.
In some of our earlier conversations, you referenced retribution, but you also referenced edify. The procedure, when followed, is designed to edify.
Correct.
You don't hear that word much now, Tim. Just for clarity, that's to lift up. That is to edify. That's to lift up. Scripture word.
That's my company logo.
To edify?
To encourage, strength. I didn't put edify down. I put encourage, strengthen, and grow.
So again, let's compare and contrast here. Retribution ends up when we become emotional, when we do not adhere to the procedure. I had to go look up the word retribution. What's that mean?
Retribution it's a consequence, a pour out of the emotion of being wrong. What's the definition that you looked up?
I don't recall. I took a screenshot of it, but it was a bad word.
No, it's a bad word.
It's something.
It is a bad word.
Should be avoidable. If I see it in my company, if I'm participating in it as a supervisor, I should be looking for somebody upstream to say, look, what's the policy here? How do we do this? And I can, again, I'm talking about performance here and workflow and us getting along and communicating. And when it doesn't happen, when the emotions are all flaring and there's retribution, it's not just about morale and productivity. Now you got silos.
Yeah, without a plan. Without a plan.
We haven't even talked about safety critical tasks.
You've been listening to the EQ for Life podcast. To learn more about the EQ for Life podcast or Parrish, please contact us online at info@parishowentaylor.com or call 866-487-2815. That's 866-487-2815.